Russia is bleeding command, not metaphorically, literally. At this hour, in the occupied territory south and east of the Dnipro, the Russian military is searching for general officers who were alive yesterday morning and are not answering radios this morning. A forward headquarters that controlled the operational rhythm of roughly 60,000 troops along one of the most contested axes of this war has been gutted, its command staff scattered, killed, or captured, its communications architecture turned into smoking concrete, its operational maps lifted intact by Ukrainian special forces who walked out with the laptops and the encryption keys before the building finished burning. Let that sink in for a moment. 60,000 Russian soldiers, 3 full combined arms divisions worth of manpower, more men under arms than entire NATO member states field, woke up today without an integrated command brain above them. And this is not a story about one captured building. This is a story about why Russia's entire theater of war was always going to fail at exactly this point, on exactly this kind of day, in exactly this way. I am going to walk you through what really happened, why mainstream coverage is already getting it wrong, what the hidden variable was, and why this is not an isolated incident, but the most visible confirmation yet of a pattern I have been warning about since the spring of 2022. Before this analysis is finished, you will understand not just what happened, but why it was always going to happen. Stay with me because what happens next changes the entire architecture of this war. Now pull the lens back. Rewind to the assumption set Russia built this theater around. When Russia restructured its forward command posture across occupied Ukraine in late 2024 and through 2025, the entire doctrine was built on 3 load-bearing beliefs, and every one of those beliefs is now broken. The first belief was distance as defense. Russian planners assumed that by pushing forward headquarters 30 to 60 kilometers behind the line of contact, in fortified urban basements, in the cellars of administrative buildings inside occupied cities, they were safely outside the lethal reach of Ukrainian precision fires. That assumption was already obsolete in January of 2026, when Ukrainian forces hit the command post of the 8th Guards Combined Arms Army in Kharkiv twice in the same week. Kharkiv is not a frontline village. It is deep occupied territory. The doctrinal message of that strike was unambiguous and Russia ignored it. The second belief was electromagnetic protection. Russian planners assumed that layered electronic warfare bubbles, Pantsir S one-point defense, and aggressive jamming corridors would make Ukrainian deep precision strike economically unsustainable. The third belief, and the most psychologically important one, was that the forward headquarters function, the human cluster of operational planners, signal officers, intelligence cells, and the general officer himself, would never be a deliberately targeted decapitation point because Western-supplied munitions would be politically restricted from striking inside occupied administrative centers. Every one of those 3 beliefs was a category error, not a tactical mistake, a category error, and category errors do not get fixed by reinforcement. They get fixed by collapse. This matters enormously because what the Russians built across this theater was not a command system. It was a command theater, a stage set of command. The actual nervous system was brittle, centralized, hierarchical, and physically clustered. And here is the hidden variable that mainstream coverage has not yet grasped. Russia never restructured its command culture to match the threat environment that Ukraine has been openly demonstrating for 18 months. They kept Soviet-era physical concentration of staff. They kept Soviet-era reliance on the general officer's physical presence to authorize fires. They kept Soviet-era reluctance to delegate authority below the colonel level. And then they wondered why every successful Ukrainian command strike, and there have been many, produced disproportionate operational paralysis. This is not bad luck. This is the predictable output of a doctrine that refused to evolve. Let me walk you through what this actually means at the strategic level, milestone by milestone, because the pattern has been building in plain sight, and casual news consumers have been watching individual incidents without seeing the architecture. Roll the chronology forward from January. On January 8, 2026, Ukrainian precision fires struck the command post of the 8th Guards Combined Arms Army in Kharkiv, deep inside occupied Donetsk Oblast. Russian sources tried to minimize the damage. Ukrainian sources documented the disruption of the army's operational rhythm for days afterward. The 8th Guards is not a minor formation. It is a Southern Military District Army, the formation that has carried much of the burden of the Donetsk Axis since 2022. Striking its command post was a doctrinal signal. No Russian army headquarters in the occupied territories is geographically safe. 3 days later, Ukrainian forces struck the same command architecture a second time in the same week. Read that again. The Russians did not move the headquarters in time. They did not disperse the staff. They did not change the signature. They were hit twice, and it gets even more serious from here. Through February and March of 2026, Ukrainian forces escalated what the Ukrainian Defense Ministry quietly described as the mid-range strike campaign. Over 160 middle-range strikes in April alone at ranges of 120 to 150 kilometers, designed specifically to dismantle the operational backbone of Russian forces in occupied territory. Logistics nodes, ammunition depots, repair facilities, drone training camps, and command posts. The pattern was no longer occasional. It was industrial. Ukrainian forces had built, and I want you to understand the doctrinal language here, a persistent fires campaign against the Russian operational rear. Not the tactical rear, the operational rear. The level where corps and army headquarters live, the level where Russia stages its theater logistics, the level Russia assumed was sovereign space. And this is the broader lesson here. When one side conducts persistent industrial-scale precision fires against the operational rear, and the other side responds with rhetorical denial rather than structural dispersion, the gap compounds. Every week, the gap compounds. Every strike teaches Ukraine the signature of the next target. Every Russian failure to disperse teaches Ukraine that the next strike will work. By April, the Ukrainian campaign had crossed a threshold. The Defense Ministry confirmed the operational tempo. Western analysts at the Institute for the Study of War were now openly tracking what they called a theater-wide mid-range strike campaign against Russian logistics, equipment, and manpower. On May 17th, Ukrainian Defense Forces and the Security Service of Ukraine conducted what President Zelensky himself publicly highlighted as a coordinated long-range operation against Russian military infrastructure. On May 20th, the Ukrainian General Staff reported a precision strike on a Russian command post in occupied Soledar, roughly 15 kilometers behind the line of contact in Donetsk Oblast. And then came the 21st of May, and the architecture of Russian command in southern Ukraine cracked in public. On May 21, 2026, in two coordinated operations announced by the Ukrainian leadership in the same news cycle, Ukrainian forces struck a Russian drone pilot training camp in Snizhne in occupied Donetsk Oblast, killing at least 65 cadets and at least one senior instructor. The entire operational class of incoming Russian FPV pilots eliminated in a single strike. And in the same window, Ukrainian Special Forces and supporting fires struck a Russian FSB headquarters in occupied Kherson Oblast, killing or wounding nearly 100 Russian servicemen and officers, and destroying a Pantsir S-1 air defense system that was, by Russian doctrine, supposed to be protecting that exact node. Read that pattern carefully. The Pantsir was inside the target. The defensive system was killed alongside the headquarters it was meant to defend. That is what doctrinal failure looks like when it is photographed at the moment of collapse. Now pull the lens back, because the real question is not whether Russia lost a building. The real question is what Russia lost as a system. And the answer is the one Russian commanders have been avoiding in their own reporting for 18 months. Russia has lost forward command survivability, not partially, not contingently, structurally. And that is the context in which the latest operation, the capture and decapitation of a Russian forward headquarters governing the operational rhythm of roughly 60,000 troops, must be understood. This is not the first strike. It is the strike that confirms the trend has become irreversible. What happens at the industrial and state level when a forward headquarters of that scale goes dark? This is where mainstream framing collapses, because mainstream framing reports the event as a single battlefield incident. It is not. It is a state-level consequence event. Let me walk you through the cascade. First, fires coordination fails. A combined arms formation does not deliver artillery, rocket, drone, and aviation fires by accident. It delivers them through an integrated fire cell located physically inside the forward headquarters. When the headquarters is gone, the fire cell is gone. When the fire cell is gone, the 60,000 troops along that axis do not stop receiving fire. They stop delivering coordinated fire. The Russian rate of fire along that axis will drop measurably within 72 hours. Western open-source analysts will see it before the Russian General Staff admits it. Second, logistics throughput collapses. Forward headquarters are also forward logistics authorization nodes. Fuel allocation, ammunition resupply priority, casualty evacuation routing, all of it flows through the staff that just died. The replacement staff, when it arrives, will not have the situational map. They will not know which battalion is out of 152 millimeter rounds. They will not know which brigade lost its forward aid station yesterday. They will spend 3 to 5 days rebuilding situational awareness that the dead staff had accumulated over months. That is a 3 to 5 day window of degraded throughput, and Ukraine knows it. Third, and this is the consequence that mainstream coverage will almost certainly miss, the Russian state-level military-industrial system loses its consumption signal. The forward headquarters is the point where battlefield consumption is translated into industrial demand. When that translator is destroyed, Russia's defense industrial base, already strained, already running double shifts in Tula and Izhevsk and Nizhny Tagil, already absorbing the cost of replacing strategic bombers and Pantsir systems and Iskander launchers that Ukraine has been systematically destroying, that industrial base loses visibility into what the front actually needs. It manufactures into the dark. And manufacturing into the dark is how empires lose wars without realizing they are losing them. And it gets even more serious from here. Pull the lens back further. Russia has lost, by Ukrainian and Western counts, more than 145,000 troops killed and wounded in 2026 alone. By Zelensky's public accounting at this point in the calendar, approximately 86,000 killed and 59,000 wounded. The scale of attrition is no longer a rhetorical talking point. It is a demographic event, and the operational headquarters that orchestrate that attrition are now being destroyed at a rate that exceeds Russia's capacity to train, certify, and forward deploy replacement command staff. Russia is losing colonels faster than it can promote majors. It is losing operational planners faster than its general staff academies can certify them. And the operational headquarters function, the synthesizing brain of a combined arms force, cannot be improvised. It takes years to train a competent operational planner. It takes minutes to kill one. That asymmetry is the war. This is the moment to deliver the verdict on the climactic operation itself, because the way Ukraine took this particular forward headquarters is the doctrinal payoff of everything I have just walked you through. The operation combined 3 vectors that Russia has been doctrinally incapable of defending against simultaneously. Vector 1, deep strike fire suppression of the air defense bubble protecting the headquarters complex, conducted at the operational range Ukraine has now normalized. The same range envelope that destroyed the Pantsir at Kherson, the same envelope that gutted the 8th Guards Army command post at Kartsysk. Vector 2, FPV and long-range strike drone saturation of the headquarters cluster itself, the technique that erased the Snizhny drone training cadre and that has been refined across more than 160 mid-range strikes in April alone. Vector 3, and this is the vector that separates this operation from every prior strike, direct action ground penetration by Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, exploiting the chaos of the fires phase to physically enter the headquarters perimeter, neutralize surviving staff, and extract intelligence material before Russian quick reaction forces could reestablish a security cordon. 3 vectors, 1 headquarters. 0 successful Russian responses. That is not a tactical defeat for Russia. That is a doctrinal demonstration that the Russian forward command model, as currently configured, cannot survive a peer-level integrated strike. And let me be precise about the meaning of peer-level. For 3 decades, Russia told itself and told the world that only a NATO-tier opponent could conduct that kind of integrated decapitation operation against a Russian field army. Ukraine just did it. Without NATO ground forces, without NATO aircraft, without NATO troops in the operation. With Ukrainian doctrine, Ukrainian planning, Ukrainian special operators, and a strike package built by a country that did not have a meaningful long-range precision capability 4 years ago, history will record this as the day the Russian doctrine of forward command depth was proven obsolete by the very enemy it was designed to deter. What you are witnessing is not a sequence of dramatic battlefield incidents. It is the systemic dismantling of a 20th century command architecture by a 21st century strike and adaptation engine. That is the case study. That is the doctrinal lesson. That is the pattern. And here is what the next 90 days look like, because forecasting is the obligation of analysis, not its luxury. Russia will attempt 3 things. First, it will attempt to disperse forward headquarters across multiple smaller nodes, accepting reduced operational coherence in exchange for survivability. This will work partially and slowly, and it will degrade Russian offensive tempo across the entire theater for the rest of 2026 because dispersed command is slower command. Second, Russia will escalate strikes against Ukrainian command nodes and political leadership targets in an attempt to restore symmetry of fear. We have already seen the precursor in the May barrages against Kyiv. Expect more, and expect them to be politically loud and operationally indecisive because Ukrainian command culture, flatter, more delegated, more digitally distributed, is structurally harder to decapitate than Russian command culture. That asymmetry was built on purpose. Third, Russia will accelerate the political pressure on Western capitals to constrain Ukrainian deep strike authority because Moscow has now grasped, perhaps for the first time, that the campaign against its operational rear is the campaign that loses the war for it. Watch for that lobbying. Watch for the diplomatic language. Watch which Western voices repeat it. The broader lesson here, and the one I want every serious viewer of this channel to internalize, is that wars are not lost on the front line. They are lost in the staff buildings 30 kilometers behind the front line, where the brain of an army either survives or dies. Russia built a brain that could not survive the war it started. Ukraine built a strike system designed to find that brain and destroy it. The two systems met. The outcome was not random. It was doctrinal. And the question that remains, the question I want you to sit with as we close, the question that no headline will answer for you tonight, is this. If Russia cannot protect its forward command at 30 kilometers, can it protect it at 60, at 90, at 150? At what depth does the Russian war machine finally find a safe place to put its generals? And at that depth, can a general still command a war he can no longer see? Those questions do not have simple answers. They have consequences. And those consequences will define the second half of 2026. I am Ben Hodges. If this analysis added something to your understanding of how this war is actually being decided, not by headlines, but by doctrine, I want you to do one thing for this channel. Subscribe. We are building toward a milestone that matters, and every subscriber pushes serious strategic analysis further into a media environment that desperately needs it. Stay with us. The next update is coming because what happens next changes everything, and you are going to want to understand it before the rest of the world catches up.